In November 1990, the most terrible murderer of the USSR, Andrei Chikatilo, was detained. His name is known throughout the world, it causes fear and is firmly associated with dozens of monstrous murders. To this day, films and TV series are made about him, and his fanatical followers compete in the number of victims. But why did it take Chikatilo 13 years to catch him? At the same time, they even convicted the innocent and spent as much as 10 million Soviet rubles on the search. And how did you manage to get on the trail of this maniac? The future killer was born in October 1936 in Ukraine in the Kharkov region. Allegedly, the boy had congenital hydrocephalus, a brain disease that causes headaches and impaired vision. In addition, Chikatilo was allegedly beaten by his mother because he had urinary incontinence. When the Great Patriotic War began, the boy's father went to the front. At this time, the village in which Andrei stayed with his mother was captured by the Germans, as if Chikatilo then witnessed brutal executions. They also shot at the fleeing children. According to legend, then Andrei slipped and hit his head on a stone. And he woke up lying in a hole among dead bodies. During the war, Andrei's mother gave birth to a girl, allegedly after rape. According to rumors, the child's father was a German soldier. In 1933, my older brother Stepan was eaten during a famine. My mother warned me all the time, don't leave Stepan's yard, they've eaten you, they'll eat you. But there is no evidence that Chikatilo had a brother. Probably, the children were simply scared so that they would not go outside. In the future, he said that when he was 14 years old, a neighbor tried to rape him. He will remember the stress for a long time, and in the army Chikatilo will still be raped, but by his colleagues. But still, when Andrei returned to his native village after demobilization, the girls found him attractive. But at the very last moment, nothing worked out for Chikatilo. The rumor spread throughout the village that he was an unfit invalid, and he ran away from the village in disgrace. Only Andrei's future wife managed to cope with him. There was no passion in their marriage, but they still managed to have 2 children. For her, he was a faithful, calm and hard-working husband. Allegedly, he couldn't even cut up the chicken because he felt sorry for it. But at what point did he begin to turn into a real monster? For the first time, Chikatilo's deviations began to appear during his work at a boarding school. He sat down with schoolgirls to explain difficult topics to them. And at this time he stroked and hugged them. With one he even locked himself in the classroom. But after Andrei Romanovich took the students to swim, his career as a teacher quickly ended. Then one of the girls allegedly swam far away. Chikatilo noticed that a teenager who had strayed from the group swam up to her and began to grab her indecently. The girl was very scared and began to break free. At this moment the maniac experienced excitement. Of course, Andrei Romanovich was forced to write a statement as soon as this case became known. Soon Chikatilo took his family to the city of Shukti, Rostov region, where he found a new job as a supply worker. It was necessary to travel on it often on business trips. This will give the maniac the opportunity to kill people in different regions of the USSR, which will complicate his search. In December 1978, information about the disappearance of second-grader Elena Zakotnova spread around the city. 2 days later she will be found raped and strangled in the Grushevka River. Investigators quickly detained a certain Alexander Kravchenko. The suspect had previously been convicted of rape, so suspicion fell on him. Chikatilo was also suspected of this murder at that time, but they could not prove his involvement, there was no significant evidence. At the same time, Kravchenko was shot, and the murder case of Elena Zakotnova later raised a debate about the need for the death penalty. This was the first murder in a series of bloody massacres of minors and women of easy virtue. Then the media were silent. In the USSR they simply could not tell that a cruel maniac was operating in the country. Therefore, many girls did not even suspect what danger might threaten them. The maniac looked for his victims at bus stops or train stations. After that, he offered to show the way or watch a movie on a video recorder in a private house. Gullible victims voluntarily went to painful death. Chikatilo killed the girls not far from the paths where people often walked. According to him, it was as if spirits were guarding him. I myself heard people passing by, but they didn't. Investigators believed that a mentally ill person should kill with such cruelty, and detentions of mentally ill people began. Locals called the police action a matter of fools. Then they managed to detain several insane people who confessed to the murders. But this did not stop the wave of crimes. All these detentions and unfair sentences only delayed the investigation from the main goal, the capture of the real maniac Chikatilo. In addition, the police were hampered by the lack of hard evidence. Only once did the maniac arouse suspicion among law enforcement officers. They noticed a strange man who was pestering girls near the station, not far from the park. After watching him for a while, they managed to find out that he often changes transport, spends the night at the station, and in addition, has connections with girls of easy virtue. It would seem that everything has come together and we need to take the potential killer. In the morning, Chikatilo was indeed detained. A knife, rope, and Vaseline were found in his suitcase. But it was not there. Andrei Romanovich explained that he ties boxes with rope, cuts bread with a knife, and uses Vaseline after shaving. They took blood from the maniac, but experts mistakenly believed that it should be of the fourth group. Chikatilo had a second group of blood. The maniac was released, and the murder resumed. They began to seriously search for the monster only when the number of victims exceeded 40. 10 million Soviet rubles were allocated for his search. Helicopters were launched into the sky, and vigilantes helped police in their search on the ground. Among them was Chikatilo himself, who helped to search for himself in order to escape suspicion, and at the same time understand the scale of the search. During the operation, more than 1,000 crimes were solved, but the maniac still could not be caught. In 1986, there was not a single murder similar in style. But a year later, new victims began to appear outside the Rostov region. At that time, investigators knew that the criminal had to travel by trains, buses, and trains. Pretty police officers in plain clothes were on duty in the carriages and at the stations, but they did not know that this type was not attractive to Chikatilo. He was interested in underage boys and girls, easily accessible tramps. In an attempt to find out the psychological portrait of the killer, operatives turned to psychiatrist Alexander Buchanovsky. He described the maniac as a calm and reasonable family man, heterosexual and impotent. He explained his conclusion by saying that the maniac used a blade as a genital organ and collected intimate parts of the body as trophies. In November 1990, the last murder occurred, after which Chikatilo, as before, went to the platform to leave. Usually he managed to get lost among other people, but not this time. His coat with sticky leaves and his suitcase revealed that he was not an avid mushroom picker at all. Meanwhile, the policeman asked the maniac to show his passport. 10 days later he was put under surveillance. Then we discovered that Chikatilo was constantly trying to meet boys and girls. And after one of the unfortunate incidents, he almost threw himself under the wheels of a car. On November 20, the killer left work early to go to the emergency room for a sore finger. A 16-year-old boy bit it through to him. When Chikatilo found out that he had a fracture, he, upset, went to the store to buy beer, which they poured into a 3-liter jar. At the exit from the store the police took him. At first, the criminal denied everything and did not talk to investigators. The police still did not have direct evidence of guilt. Then psychiatrist Alexander Buchanovsky again came to the aid of law enforcement officers. Over the course of 3 hours of conversation, he pulled out from Chikatilo a sincere confession, written by hand in a notebook. A prosperous, pleasant-looking man confessed to 50 murders. But their exact number is still unknown. While Chikatilo was being tried, he pretended to be insane in every possible way. He made faces, pretended to be sick and took off his pants in front of everyone. All the relatives of the victims present in the hall tried to inflict damage on the cruel killer. They threw objects at him, shouted and even wanted to break through to the cage in order to destroy the maniac with their own hands. On February 13, after Chikatilo was sentenced, he was told that he would be taken for examination. In fact, the maniac went to execution. In the years since Chikatilo's execution, he has gained monstrous followers. In Moscow and Angarsk, Irkutsk region, Alexander Pikishkin and Mikhail Popkov carried out brutal murders. The most terrible killers after Chikatilo. Pikishkin tried to make the number of kills according to the number of squares on the chessboard. Of the 64, only 49 have been proven today. Mikhail Popkov outperformed Chikatilo at least twice. Both maniacs are in prison for life. The identity of Chikatilo is still controversial. Some believe he was mentally ill and needed to be treated. Others believe that the death penalty is not a harsh enough punishment for such monsters. What do you think? How should maniacs be punished? What could help catch Chikatilo faster?